Hey, aspiring leaders, quick announcement before we dive into today's episode with Kurtis Hewson, co-author of Collaborative Response, co-founder of Jigsaw Learning, and champion of collaborative school structures. Charlie Peck and I are going to have a wonderful free webinar Thursday, February 12th at 12 p.m. Eastern Time, as we are going to be equipping school leaders and staff with better tools for student behavior. Charlie and I know that February can be a really tough month, as it's typically the most referred month in regards to student behavior. It can be stressful. You may want to pull your hair out, but we're going to try our very best to prepare you for this tough time as the spring is upon us. In the show notes, you'll be able to see that you have an option to register and click at thrivingeducator.myflowdesk.com/webinar February 2026. And so when you click on that, you're going to be able to get that free registration for our event on February 12th at 12 p.m. Eastern Time. So we're looking forward to seeing you there. If you can't make it at that time, please register anyways. We'll make sure that the recording is sent your way, so that way you can still get this valuable information. Now, let's jump into the conversation with Kurtis Hewson. He's an amazing educational leader up in Canada. Had a chance to connect with him on his podcast, and now we're going to flip the script and have him on a guest here on Aspire to Lead. Welcome to Aspire to Lead, where we empower educators and school leaders to grow, inspire, and thrive. I'm your host, Joshua Stamper, author, speaker, and leadership coach, bringing you conversations that spark transformation, challenge the status quo in education, and equip you to make a lasting impact on your campus or in your district. For more information and resources, visit joshstamper.com, as we're looking to ascend to new leadership heights together. All right, we are back to Aspire to Lead, and I am so thankful that you're joining us once again. I have a fantastic guest and someone that I've connected with a lot lately. I was a guest on his podcast. Now we're flipping the script, and he gets to be on the mic as a guest here. Kurtis Hewson, thank you so much for being on Aspire to Lead.
Oh, Josh, it's an absolute honor to be here with you and really looking forward to the conversation. I so enjoyed a chance to connect with you on our Building a Culture of Collaboration podcast, and to flip the mic the other way has been great.
Kurtis, you have such energy. I loved our conversation. Can't wait for that episode to drop. I also got a chance, for those who are watching on YouTube, to check out his book, Collaborative Response. Brilliant. We're going to use this kind of as the guideline for our conversation today. But before we jump in, I'd love for you just to share a little bit about yourself, about your educational and leadership background.
Yeah, absolutely, Josh. So I'm approaching my third decade in education. Love every minute of it. I got into this to make a difference for kids, and that's been the driving mantra all the way through. And now the work I get to do is hopefully making a difference for a lot of kids. So that's been the driving factor. Josh, you may not know this, but I actually got into leadership very, very early in my career. It was just a weird circumstance where the district I had started my career in was looking at a grow your own leaders type of a program. They were seeing a little bit of a gap in coming in regards to their leadership pool, and so wanted to build some grow your own. So it was in my second year of teaching that my principal came and tapped and said, I think you should consider this. And I went, sure, but it's going to be a lot of learning here for me. But similar to you, wasn't really on my radar. But when somebody taps you and you start to reflect and go, yeah, go, great. So I moved into leadership, into an AP role with, I think it was in first year and a half into teaching, and realized really quick that I couldn't be the be all, know all for everyone, because I'm working with people who have a lot more experience in the classroom than I did. So it really helped frame my perspective as a leader about how do I learn as I go along? How do I support? And then most importantly, how do I leverage the expertise that is around me? Because it's way more powerful than me trying to think I need the answers, which I would suggest for any leader, stop trying to hold all the answers, start figuring out how to solicit the solutions. So move forward. My last school that I was in as a principal, really great place, wonderful people doing great things for kids, but we were seeing kids slipping through the cracks. People were feeling overwhelmed. So we started to build some systems, structures, different ways that we were interacting, ways that we were leveraging the centuries of teaching experience that existed within the building. And we started to see impact for kids, and alongside that, impact for staff. We found it wasn't until years later when John Hattie started to write about this thing called collective efficacy, where we went, oh, that's naming what we were feeling. Within the building, people started to come and visit. I started to get requests out to share how were we doing this in other places. It was almost 2 decades ago at that point, and we named it Collaborative Response, and then have been working with other schools and districts since that time of implementing this framework that's described in that book you're holding.
Yeah, I can't wait to jump into this. So let's talk about why you thought the book needed to be written, right? Because obviously we're trying to solve problems with our books. And so I'm curious what you saw on your campus and, some of the components that you thought was going to be super helpful for educators, not only in Canada, but here in the United States.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, Josh, where it started with is it felt like I was answering the same questions repeatedly. And so started off by writing blogs of, here's something that people often ask, and I can share from what it looked like in our school building. So it was back in 2015. My wife, who's co-author, when you talk about the brilliance in the book, it's all coming from her. I just get to put my name on it as well. We self-published a book around this in 2015, just to try and explain how we had been doing this in our school, and then also sharing, and here's some of the ways we've seen this framework being adopted in other schools and whatnot. But then we started to deal with all sorts of variations of schools, not just within our home province of Alberta or across Canada, but now we were starting to engage with schools throughout North America, Iceland, Australia, and started to see some nuances and some bigger ideas that were applicable when we started to look at other contexts and other situations. So it reached a point where we had to rethink and evolve what our understanding of this collaborative response, and we often say it's a mindset, it's a way of how you're ruthlessly organizing yourselves in schools to respond to the needs of students while building capacity across your team at the same time. The book you're holding there was taking all of those ideas and just sharing out, here's the universal understandings that we've seen that can apply in any school, in any situation. We talk about 3 foundational components related to the work, and we've seen it over and over and over again in every geographic location you can think of, every type of school, every configuration, and it works for not just student impact, but kids. I have to tell you, Josh, whenever I see that self-published book now on someone's desk or table, I cringe a little bit. I usually go to the car and say, throw that out, please, and use this, because we, at that time, had a slight understanding, but nowhere near where it's at now. I cringe when I see that other book, and please don't follow what it's talking about in there. Take this one, please.
Well, you said 2015, right? I mean, that's a long time. Yeah, definitely get this book. I can't tell you how awesome it is. It's got QR codes and graphics and tables and things that people can use right away tomorrow. I did want to touch on real quick before we jump into the 3 components is that you talk about, and I want you to dive a little bit deeper on this as far as every child deserves a team. Yeah. And sometimes I think educators are like, well, I've got a PLC, I've got MTSS, I've got, fill in the blank as to the teams that are on the campus. Of course, we're using those teams to help our kids, but you kind of have a different thought process through this. So, when we're adopting the collaborative response, what does that actually look like and feel like on a building?
Yeah, absolutely, Josh. And the great news is schools that have PLC structures or MTSS structures, when they come across our work, they go, oh, this is the piece that we were missing. This is the piece that brings it all together. And that idea of every child deserves a team is really founded in the idea that every one of our children deserve the collective expertise of our team. And no child's success or lack thereof should ever be the responsibility of a single person. We owe it to our kids that everyone is benefiting because we are working together, collaborating, and we're getting better all the time, which supports every kid. So if you have a campus of 1,500 students, I'm not saying you need 1,500 teams. Of course not. That's ridiculous. But by having really succinct and purposeful, intentional team structures, we're going to benefit every child along the way. And I think in our education system, our kids deserve us working together, learning together, and bringing the best of one another to the table. It doesn't happen without clear structures and processes for how we collaborate.
Well, and that talks through something you said too with that MTSS process about like stop tiering students and tier the supports instead. And I love that concept. So will you go a little bit further as far as maybe provide an example of what that practice looks like?
Yeah, you bet. Within our framework, we talk about one of the foundational components being a continuum of supports. And essentially, can we clearly articulate within our building? And in some cases, we work with school districts where we start to articulate it across the district. Can we clearly describe how we respond for our students and name it? I often say to schools, you have amazing things happening in your building, name them, write them down. We're going to organize it. And for every teacher, you have a toolbox. Awesome. We're going to bring it all together into a tool shed. And so most literature out there, most MTSS structures, the previous RTI, response to intervention, we look at 3 tiers. What we were finding when we were tiering our students is it was not lining up with the theoretical, and I know people have seen different variations of this, but the 80%, 15%, 5%, or different researchers will tell you different things, wasn't lining up with that. And we were not getting consistency or clarity on when we say universal, what do we mean? What does that look like here for us? So we had to describe it, and we talk about 4 tiers, and it's not about adding one more tier on top. It's about taking universal and getting crystal clear in our school what that means. So we often say tier 1 is in time the non-negotiables. If we were talking about our literacy continuum of supports, we should be able to describe what are the 5 to 10 big rocks in our school that we agree everyone will be doing in every classroom. But then our tier 2, which is still in that universal, becomes what are the things that you could be doing in your classroom to support kids. We're not saying you must, that's our tier 1, but tier 2 these are things that you could. And so when we started to tier the supports, we started to understand that we could provide exceptional support for a student with complex needs by getting really good at our tier 2 responses for that student. Still classroom based. Doesn't mean that the student was a tier 2 kid. It meant right now we can have success by putting these processes and structures, these differentiated strategies in place in the classroom. Now we might have a student who falls into crisis, and we need to go and look at accessing supports beyond the classroom and then beyond the school. So for us, tier 3 become the supports provided beyond the classroom, but still within the school. Tier 4 are the supports provided beyond the school. We may need to access tier 4 level supports for this kid in the immediate crisis, but it doesn't mean they're a tier 4 kid. It changes a mindset in our school of people saying, well, that's a tier 3 kid, not my responsibility. We say, no. Every child is our responsibility. It's just we're going to layer supports on at times of need or as appropriate for our student. It's a radical change because when we tier students, it's almost putting the attention on what's the student doing or not doing. When we tier the supports, it becomes what are we doing as a response to what we're seeing. It's a radical change in mindset, and it's one I think makes a tremendous difference in our schools.
Yeah, but it also probably helps not label the student also, right?
100%. And that's why that second foundational component of data and evidence, we can use our data and evidence to categorize and flag who we should be paying attention to, but we're losing the label of this is a tier 2 kid, tier 3 kid. Nope, this is Daryl. And right now, Daryl needs tier 3 supports in this area for their success. Probably not always, or maybe, who knows? But right. Again, it's defining how are we responding to the needs of our students. And through the use of our data and evidence, we start identifying who should we be paying attention to, who's the data saying is not there, what are some of the general trends we're seeing. And then we utilize the third foundational component, and these aren't really numbered 1, 2, 3. I'm just doing that for sake, is you'll see in the book that it's held together with 3 puzzle pieces. The biggest puzzle piece is collaborative structures and processes, because if we do not have strong team structures, and we talk about layers of collaboration in schools, then the best data and evidence and continuum of supports don't matter. We need to have spaces where we're collaborating together to, again, we often say, don't think of what we're sharing as a program. This is a mindset. It's how do we collaboratively respond to the needs of students in our building through some very intentionally designed systems.
So when you were working with the school or district and they're wanting this program, right? They're like, I have got a bunch of silos. I got a bunch of different groups, but no one is actually layering their collaboration or their collaborative teams. What do you suggest leaders do to like start that entry point?
Josh, we often say, and I hope that you give me a little bit of a furrowed brow look when I say this, as we often do, but we start with saying we're going to reduce the number of meetings in your building by adding one more.
Can I clap instead, Kurtis? Yeah. Is that all right if I clap?
You can. What we find is we introduce something called the collaborative team meeting, and we talk about it in the book. We have lots of resources on the website around it. In fact, we're just finishing up the first draft of a book all about just that meeting structure. And what we find is it has incredible impact across the school. So Josh, I want for you to picture schools that you've worked with or your own that you've led. What we found over and over and over again in schools of 25 students, in schools of 2,500 students, 4 layers of collaboration that we want to be able to aspire to really not just respond to kids, but build our capacity as we do this. So let me describe these 4 layers. I'm going to pause and for you to say, okay, well, that sounds like X in my building. Okay. So I'm going to start with the first layer. First layer, we call collaborative planning, and think of these as categories. They may not actually be what you call your meetings. In the collaborative planning layer, we want teachers primarily to be coming together to look at what could we do to impact the overall cohort. We're examining data, we're creating goals, we're testing out what that looks like, we're examining our classroom practices. Hopefully this is happening on a regular basis within the school. We often say we've seen schools that do it weekly, some that do it bi-weekly, some that put it into their staff meetings, professional learning days, monthly after school, whatever it looks like. And we've seen lots of different types of things happening at this, but essentially that first layer is about teachers just collaborating on things that they think will impact the whole, either my whole class, this whole cohort, this entire department. This should align very closely to something that I assume you have a lot of experience. What does this sound like to you if you were to talk about something that's existing already in a lot of schools across the country?
I was thinking of PLC meetings.
PLCs. We didn't call it that because we did also see some schools that had strong practices that fit in this overall layer, but they weren't calling it PLCs. They weren't necessarily following our traditional do 4.
It looks so different too, as far as who's participating, what their role and responsibilities are, what are they covering, how they go through and assess data. So it's not a universal model, unfortunately.
No, but a school that says we have PLC practices built in, we say, awesome, your first layer's already established. I'm going to skip the second layer and get to the third. The third layer we call the school support team structure. And what this is intended to be is, in my school, it was the principal, the assistant principal. We had a learning support teacher who was responsible when kids got referred for additional testing or additional referrals. She was coordinating that. And we had a family school liaison that we shared with the high school. They were in our building half-time. This was the team that was responsible. We would meet every week and responsible for supporting students that need support in addition to or beyond the classroom. Sometimes the conversations were about how do we support the student? Sometimes the conversation was what type of support do we need to give to the teacher? Is there some coaching, some modeling that we could be doing? But essentially we were coordinating supports beyond the classroom. Now, again, any school that has MTSS-like structures, you probably are having this conversation already. I've worked with a large high school of 2,000 students where they didn't have one school support team. There was multiple. There was a grade 10 team, a grade 11 team, a grade 12 team. There was also then a counseling team that was looking at wellness issues beyond the classroom. So we need that layer in place. And again, I see you nodding. It's probably not something unique to collaborative response, I would certainly hope. Again, we see it already existing in a lot of buildings.
For sure.
And getting really clear on its purpose. The fourth layer we call the case consult. And the idea is whenever we have one student on the agenda and we get the right people around the table, it fits into that layer. And usually it's in response to crisis or complexity. For students, I worked with one large high school. When I laid out these layers, they went, whoa, most of our meetings are fitting in that case consult layer. They had 1,200 students, and it totally explained why they felt exhausted, overwhelmed. They were trying to go one kid at a time in a school of 1,200 kids. You need these other layers. So you're nodding. Every school since the beginning of time has meetings that have happened at this layer. One kid on the agenda and get the right people at the table. It might include social services. It might include parents or guardians. The kid themselves might be in that conversation. Who knows?
Yeah. I've been on
Okay.
campuses where it's 1,200, 1,500, and we've done that. And you're right, it kills you.
Yeah.
It's a lot of work.
Right. And so we had these layers in place. And what we were finding is sometimes our PLC-like structures were not always responding to the day-to-day things that we were seeing with the kids. And sometimes it felt like a handoff when it got up to the other layers. A teacher saying, I've done everything, and I'm now referring them, where we would go, oh, I wish Josh could have a chance to connect with this person 3 doors down, because they have some strategies and ideas that would help before this kid ever reached our school support team layer. And in the book, we describe how these layers of team start to align with the tiers of the continuum as well. And so we introduced this structure. This is a long way to get to where I started with reduce your number of meetings by adding one more. We had something special called the collaborative team meeting. And if we have time, I'd love to describe this to you. It is a radical meeting format that allows us to access toolboxes, multiple toolboxes, to talk about what could we do in response to students. And what we find over time is less and less students surface into that school support team layer or the case consult layer, because the capacity is growing over and over and over again in the classrooms.
Well, I think it's a perfect segue, because your new book's coming out in May and it's called Collaborative Team Meetings. So.
Yeah, we're playing with the subtitle of Bridging PLCs and MTSS, because
Nice.
Any schools that have those structures, as soon as they see this, they go, oh my goodness, this is our missing piece. Let me describe this. So this meeting is intended to be scheduled every 3 to 5 weeks-ish, think monthly. And in time, it doesn't matter who is in the conversation. So I often say collaboratively plan. And again, in your mind, think PLC. Do that with people that you share a common teaching experience with, either same subject area, same grade level, same focus that you're looking at. I've worked with schools where they have one of their collaborative planning structures is we have a literacy team, a numeracy team, and a well-being team, and each one are leading efforts within our school. Awesome. You're not talking about individual kids in that. You're talking about what could we be doing to impact all. But we can get into the collaborative team meeting and we can start mixing people because of the process I'm about to share with you. So we start off with, here are our norms. Let's pick one that we're going to practice. And so, norms have been discussed in the PLC work for decades here for us. And then we start with, Josh, what's a celebration that you've brought today? And in time, we start connecting it to data so that you can say, when I reviewed my data, I have Marcus, and my celebration is he's jumped 3 levels in his reading progressions over the past 2 months. It's been remarkable to see this. Then a facilitator is going to say, that's incredible. What do you think you did that led to that success? So we'll usually take about 10 minutes to go around, but we're asking each other, what did you do that led to success? And when Josh says, it's a miracle, they just turned it around, we're going to dig and say, awesome, what do you think you did that led to that miracle? Well, the parents just started to really get on board. Okay, what did you do that led to the parents getting on board? We're really reinforcing that what we're doing is having an impact. And when you say, oh, it's no big deal, I did this, someone else in the room is going, oh, that's genius. That's a great idea. And in fact, we might even go, that's awesome. Let's write it on our continuum so we don't forget this idea 6 months from now when we have another student in a similar situation. So I often say to schools, start with the celebrations. It's a really impactful process. And then, Josh, my friend, here's the game changer. We say, Josh, who's a student that you've brought and what is the key issue? 10 seconds or less. And when I facilitate these meetings now, I'll often say, I know you've come with a student in mind. Don't say their name. What's the key issue that you're bringing forward? When schools get used to this, a teacher can really clearly articulate, here's the key issue I'm dealing with. And then what we do is we say, all right, everyone else, think of a student that you also see that key issue for, or students. Often when I'm facilitating, I'll say, just write them down, please. And then we say, all right, for this key issue, what could we do? Everyone start throwing out possibilities, ideas, and people start saying, well, I had a student one year where we did this, or in my classroom, I do this. And then someone else jumps in and goes, interesting. What if we could take that idea and do this one adjustment? And we're not evaluating the ideas. We're just adding to it. I've been in hundreds of these meetings, Josh, and over almost 30 years in the profession, I walk away from everyone with something I've never heard before. Everyone, of a website, a resource. Like teachers and those that are working in schools, because we often try and involve our paraprofessionals come into those conversations when we can, and others, the expertise that gets brought out is amazing. And then from this conversation, and we set timers, we have roles within the meeting. Then we come back and say, all right, Josh, for the student you're thinking of, you can see all of our ideas. What's one thing that you're willing to try? And you may say, put me down for this. Actually, I'm going to do a couple things that I think might work. And we say, all right, when can you get that done by? We set timelines. And then we go to the next teacher and say, all right, for the students you were thinking of, what's something that you want to try? When we focus on the key issue instead of the student, when we first started, we focused on the student. And I know everyone listening and watching has been in those conversations where we go off on tangents. I taught this kid's sister. I taught the mother. It goes all over the place. When we get into this and focus on the issue, now we can be generating solutions, ideas. When I suggest something, instead of you going, oh, I've tried that already, or no, I don't think that would, let me tell you more about the kid so that you understand better. We put that the judgment is happening internally, where you can be saying, okay, out of that list, I've tried these two things. I'm not doing that third idea because I know it won't work in this situation, or I don't feel comfortable. That's not who I am as a teacher with that idea. But there's always something I could try. And what we find through this process is people start to slowly stretch their comfort zones. We start to hear things like, I'd like to try that, but I might need some help. And for us, we often say, these meetings, everyone's an expert and everyone's a learner, because everyone has expertise that they can bring, but nobody knows everything. There's always some learning we can do. And from these collaborative team meetings, I often say, if we can all walk away with 2, 3, maybe 4 new things into our toolboxes or reminders of things that we haven't tried, this is building everybody's capacity slowly and slowly, so that, and we see this over and over and over again, in time, less and less students start getting referred up to the more intensive layers of collaboration, because our capacity at the classroom has just been growing substantially. It has incredible impact on the culture of the building too, where we just start shifting our mindsets into, okay, this is an issue. What could we do? And structuring this meeting to be able to do this has just incredible impact over time. And people who would have never thought of reaching out to one another for what would you do in this situation, start to see connections, start to value one another's expertise. It's incredibly powerful in a school when we can introduce this meeting structure.
Brilliant. Well, just again, for folks, new book is coming out this May. I can't wait to get my hands on it. So
we'll be sending you a copy. We'll send you a copy.
You're awesome, Kurtis. So that's collaborative team meetings. Make sure you're picking that up then. Also in May, you've got a special retreat, an annual collaborative response retreat. I know this is additional support for our educators. So will you just share a little bit about that retreat style?
Yeah, we would love for anyone to come and join us up here in Alberta, Canada. It happens in our home community of Lacombe. It's an intimate group where we cap it at 140 people max. And it's a day and a half where we just come together and learn from each other. During these 2 days, myself and my wife, Lorna, we don't present. We're there to help problem solve. We have, I think this year we have 18 different schools or district leaders that are there sharing, here's how we go about engaging in collaborative response in our building. Here's the successes we've seen. Here's the strategies we've done. Here's the pitfalls we ran into. And basically, it's just a powerful way to network and learn from one another, because I often say collaborative response, when you start, it's one more thing on your plate. It is. There's some heavy lifting at the start, but in time, it becomes the plate. It's just how we collaboratively respond. And once it becomes the plate, you're never done tweaking. You're never done refining. There's always going to be shifts and adjustments that you make in this work. It's like the PLC structure. It's not like we do PLCs for 3 years and then we stop doing them. No,
sure hope not.
It becomes just part of your fabric.
Some things do fall off the plate, right, Kurtis? So that's
they do.
But we want to make sure this is important work and then it doesn't fall off.
And I'm a believer that if we can put in these structures and systems, we can build immense capacity within our organizations. And I get super excited when most of the work I do now is with districts, when it's a consistent language and approach across an entire system, which then starts to have incredible impact for not just the kids in those communities, but the adults as well.
All right, Kurtis, I'm going to ask you a question I ask all my folks. So this is kind of a baseline question to bring it back to our aspiring and current leaders. So if there's something they can do tomorrow, next week to enhance their leadership journey, what would you recommend?
I think my biggest one is don't put on the Superman cape because you can't do everything, nor do you want to. I think my biggest aha early on is trust your people, listen to your people, and then most importantly, create the structures, the processes for your people to learn from one another and for you to learn alongside them as well. I've adopted this recently, Josh, the idea that I think good leaders solve problems, but I think great leaders create systems to solve problems. So that would be my key, is think about how can you build the systems that is really about enabling and empowering the incredible people you have in your organization.
Before we wrap this up, we mentioned your podcast, but I would love for my listeners to tune in also. So will you talk a little bit about your podcast?
Yeah, we actually have a couple. We have Building a Culture of Collaboration, where we bring on not just educators, but those outside of education industry to talk about how do we create meaningful teams? How do we build that culture of collaboration? And loved your insights, Josh. We're really excited for that episode to come out around that topic. We also have a podcast called Leading Collaborative Response. And on that one, we hone in specifically on the collaborative response framework. Sometimes it's my wife, Lorna, and I just talking and sharing what an idea that we've seen implemented in a school or something we've been reflecting on. Sometimes it's bringing guests on to be able to share this is what we've done in our building and the lessons that we've learned, how we've gone about structuring these teams. We sometimes bring on district leaders as well to talk about this. I don't know about you, but I love being in the podcast because not only are we able to share out with a wider audience, but selfishly, I'm learning all the time through those conversations too, which is powerful.
Yeah, I've got 3 podcasts that I now do, Kurtis. So I'm with you. I'm pretty insane. I definitely know. All right. So I've been flashing your website up on the screen for those who are tuning in on YouTube. But will you just share out how people can connect with you beyond the website?
Yeah. So search Jigsaw Learning. We are on Facebook. We have a Facebook group, The Collaborative Leader. Search that out, but you'll be able to connect with me, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, any of those. Yeah. But the best place is go to the website. On the website, you're going to see an area that says free in big capital letters under that page. So it's jigsawlearning.ca/free, or you can find it right on the webpage. On there, we have a number of free resources, an overview of collaborative response, our first chapter of the book to give away for free, and it connects them to a companion website with all the templates and digital resources. I've got free webinars on there. We have guides for creating team norms and how to go about layering teams in your organization. That's a great place to start to begin exploring without grabbing those free resources. I think will be valuable for anyone that's listening.
Oh, definitely. But also, I mean, if they want to go further, you got the book, you got the retreat, you've got courses. I mean, you got a bunch of other things that you have to offer to extend that learning. So that's amazing.
We also have our email. We send out every Saturday an email. If you go to jlinsiders.com, so jlinsiders.com, you're able to throw your email address in there. Every Saturday, we have an exclusive video that goes out to that group, blog postings, free resources, just valuable content that can help people in the work that they're doing in their schools.
Awesome. Well, I will have all the links in the show notes as usual or on joshchamber.com. So make sure that you're heading over there, connecting with Kurtis, his work, all the phenomenal resources that he has for you. And of course, we want you to make sure you pick up the Collaborative Response book also, because I've been really enjoying it, Kurtis, as I've been going through it. It's when I do this podcast, there's so many times I have a guest on and I have a book that I'm reading through. I'm like, man, I wish I had this information when I was on the campus. And this is definitely one of those resources. So for all my leaders, make sure you're grabbing a copy to help you in all of the things that Kurtis was talking about. There are so many times that we are disconnected, and this is a true format that will connect all of your folks to help better your kids. And so with that, Kurtis, I just want to say it's been such a pleasure over the last month to really connect with you on a deeper level. You have such a heart for people, for kids, to help the educational system. And it's just been an honor not only to get to know you, but then also to have you on Aspire to Lead.
Thank you so much, Josh. The feeling's very much reciprocal. So thank you so much.
This podcast is a proud member of the Teach Better Podcast Network. Better today, better tomorrow, and the podcast to get you there. Explore more podcasts at www.teachbetterpodcastnetwork.com. We'll see you on the next episode.